If you were born in this neighborhood of Barcelona, Spain, your grades in school would probably be worse than a kid born in this other neighborhood. This is not due to the neighborhood having better schools, it is not due to having a higher income. The reason behind this difference is air pollution. Let's see the evidence. In 2015, Spanish researchers conducted a study to understand the links between traffic-related air pollution in schools and cognitive development. They selected 39 schools in Barcelona based on air pollution in the area. Around half the schools, the black dots, were in areas with high pollution, and the other half, the white dots, suffered less pollution. With these 39 schools, scientists could study the cognitive development of over 2,700 kids. Scientists conducted what is known as a prospective study. That means that researchers follow two different groups with different situations over time, and in the end, they compare them. They were monitored for over 4 years, which allows to evaluate how their cognitive capacity develops. The results couldn't have been more clear. Look at this graph. In the first visit, when kids were around 7 years old, the working memory of kids was similar. However, by the second visit, 1 year later, kids in less polluted areas, the black line, had already a better working memory than the other kids. That gap grew even more over the next 2 years. When it comes to inattentiveness, which is a lack of focus or concentration, the results were very similar. While in the first year inattentiveness was similar in both groups, over the years kids in more polluted schools became less capable of focusing. The implications of these results are huge. This means that air pollution affects cognitive development in a way that will have consequences later on in life in terms of school achievements, cognitive capacity, and behavior. Long-term, kids exposed to pollution could do worse in university and earn lower incomes. This is not the conclusion of a random study. Over the last 10 years, more and more studies are coming out that have very similar results. Let's see a few of them. In 2021, a huge nationwide study in the United States came out. The study involved over 250 million tests from almost 11,000 school districts over 7 years and found, again, that air pollution was associated with lower academic performance. The study showed that the impacts of pollution were particularly bad on math tests. In Denmark, a study analyzing the academic records of 800,000 students led to very similar results. Children living in more polluted areas had worse school results in all subjects, but particularly in science and mathematics. Mathematics and science are linked to problem solving and logical reasoning, which means that pollution might be particularly bad for these capacities. All these studies and their results are very similar to the one conducted in Barcelona. Yet, this seems to be only the tip of the iceberg. In 2023, a new study found that to be impacted by pollution, kids don't even need to be born yet. The study found that children whose mothers were exposed to high levels of pollution during pregnancy scored much lower on cognitive tests when they were 2 years old. Exposure to pollution during pregnancy seems to provoke brain alterations like a thinner cortex or a smaller amygdala. This proves that air pollutants can cross the placenta and directly impact the developing brain of the fetus.
Our findings suggest that pollution exposure, particularly during mid to late pregnancy, may negatively impact neurodevelopment in early life,
said the main author of this study. Impacts on cognitive development are also impacts on mental health. In 2019, a study found that air pollution may be associated with mental health disorders like anxiety and depression in children. The researchers at the University of Cincinnati found that whenever there were increases in air pollution, there would be more psychiatric visits in the following days. The study noted that visits were mostly related to schizophrenia, adjustment disorder, and suicidal thoughts.
Collectively, these studies contribute to the growing body of evidence that exposure to air pollution during early life and childhood may contribute to depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems in adolescence,
said Patrick Ryan, one of the lead authors. That same year, a large study in the UK found that higher exposure to air pollution during early life increase the risk of psychotic experiences. The study followed over 2,000 children for 2 decades to make sure they understood the long-term impacts of exposure to pollution in childhood. Teenagers exposed to high levels of pollution had around 70% greater odds of psychotic experiences compared to those less exposed. According to the authors, this might explain why children raised in urban areas are twice more likely to develop psychosis than children raised in rural areas. All this evidence is very relevant. Mental health issues developed during teenage years are likely to persist when you are an adult.
75% of all mental health problems are going to start during this adolescent period. So it's a really good period to go in and prevent some of those longer-term issues,
said one of the authors of the previous study. The health impacts of pollution are immense. Kids are vulnerable to air pollution in a way that it's hard to fully comprehend. The impacts start in pregnancy and are dragged into adulthood. A few years of high exposure can compromise health and cognitive capacity for the rest of your life. It will impact school achievements, capacity to learn, work life, and future incomes. That's extremely unfair. As a kid, you don't have any capacity to control where you live and where you go to school, so you cannot control exposure to pollution. Yet, you will bear the consequences your whole life. Now that we have all the evidence about the negative impacts of pollution, I think it's important we talk about potential solutions. First of all, children spend a large proportion of their day in schools, and that's why a priority should be to improve air quality specifically around schools. And to do that, there are different options. First, you can establish clean air zones around schools. You can create school streets with traffic bans during school drop-off and pick-up times. More generally, you can promote walking and cycling to school as a way to reduce car emissions. To do that, you will need the right infrastructure and urban design, with safe bike lanes and bike parkings, for instance. There are other options like organizing bike trains, which have been proved to be safer and, of course, less polluting. Yet, many schools are located next to busy roads, which of course increases pollution. That's why long-term you would need to locate schools far away from busy traffic areas. Ideally, they could be located close to parks and other green areas, and you can use hedges and trees as barriers to filter air pollution. More generally, the impact of pollution on kids is also a reminder of the negative impacts of pollution for everyone. Pollution is also damaging for adults and older people. That's why we should aim to reduce it everywhere, not only around schools. In this sense, reducing car usage and promoting public transport, walking, and cycling is crucial. Cars, especially those running on gasoline, emit pollutants that harm our health. However, an important source of air pollutants is the erosion of tires, so even electric vehicles are not ideal. The ideal is to change urban design to prioritize active mobility. Walking and cycling not only reduce emissions, but are cheaper and healthier. Yet, this is not purely an individual choice. To be able to walk or cycle safely, the city needs to be designed in a way that makes it possible.